After their Impact Wrestling contracts have now officially expired, we have another update on the Good Brothers' future with the company, as well as possible options for them after leaving Impact Wrestling later this summer. All this and more in today's Impact Wrestling news. Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everybody's doing very well. As always, there are plenty of news stories to get into in the world of Impact Wrestling. So let's talk about the Good Brothers. I know we spoke about these guys yesterday and their contractual situation. That was from a report from Fightful Select. Sean Ross Sapp gave some information when it came to the Good Brothers. Their contracts have already expired. They expired last weekend after the television tapings there in Louisville, Kentucky. But we now have a further update as to their plans. Another outlet, another source is talking about their future, and I think it's interesting where that comes from and what that possibly could say about their future going forward with Impact Wrestling, or rather without Impact Wrestling. So, of course, the Impact World Tag Team Champions, they still currently hold the belts, by the way, which again adds another complexity or a complex layer to this story. The Impact World Tag Team Champions appear to be on their way out of the company. Now, obviously, as I mentioned yesterday, we spoke about Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful Select talking about the Good Brothers, but we have a new report from the Wrestling Observer newsletter, that being from Dave Meltzer. We'll talk on his sort of accuracy, shall we say, with Impact Wrestling shortly. But according to the Wrestling Observer newsletter, last week was indeed the final week on Carl Anderson and Luke Gallows' contracts with Impact Wrestling. Now, the tag team debuted for the company back in 2020, winning the Impact World Tag Team Championships 3 times over the course of their nearly 2 years with the company. Now, of course, the big thing here is that Gallows and Anderson are, of course, still in possession of the Impact Tag Team Championships. They did not drop them, spoilers, at the latest round of television tapings. It would appear they're saving that for either, an Impact Plus event or a pay-per-view or something of that nature. Clearly, they're saving it for something big, a big moment, a big main event. So it's more likely than not that the Good Brothers, of course, are going to be returning to Impact in some capacity. As we spoke about yesterday, the Good Brothers are expected to stick around with Impact Wrestling until at very least the end of the summer. Despite not currently being under contract with the company, they are factored in and featured in to creative plans until then at the very least. Whether that's just to drop the championships, or it's part of a bigger story, or they know that an angle, or they've been told that a big angle's coming up and they're going to be written out as part of that. Of course, they are still part of the Bullet Club, so if maybe, I don't know, Impact's going to write their version of the Bullet Club out of the television program, even though that their working relationship with New Japan Pro Wrestling remains. We don't really know those kind of things. We don't know, of course, if it's all just a big work, and it might be completely something that's been generated by Impact Wrestling. There might be word from Gallows and Anderson to Impact Wrestling that they plan on re-signing with the company. But hey, let's work the internet, let's work social media, brother, and then we can do a big angle where we re-sign with the company, or the Bullet Club takes over Impact Wrestling and there's a New Japan Pro Wrestling invasion, and we sign contracts, and we could do something. And certainly maybe that's what they're thinking as well. Again, we don't know that. That's not official sources or confirmation or anything like that. That's just speculation on my part as I'm looking at some of these stories. As I mentioned, though, that recent report from Fightful Select corroborated the July 17 end to the Good Brothers' current contract with Impact Wrestling, but stated, as I mentioned, that Gallows and Anderson would be with Impact Wrestling through late summer. Again, whether this is an official re-signing or a good faith agreement, it's not clear. I would assume they haven't put pen to paper or anything like that, because that's not really in what Impact Wrestling tends to do. This has happened quite a few times. I think W. Morrissey was a great example of, he signed a contract with Impact until Bound for Glory. Came in last year at it was Rebellion rather, came in at Rebellion, and then signed a contract until Bound for Glory, but stuck around way longer than that. And I don't think he had actually put pen to paper to agree that extension. He just had a working agreement. He just said with Scott D'Amore, okay, I'll stick around for a little bit. I'll do a per appearance deal. I don't know, again, if there was actual pen to paper on that per appearance deal. I don't know. We don't know those finer details, but I wouldn't think that the Good Brothers have signed a short-term extension or anything like that. It might be a handshake deal. There have been several talents in Impact Wrestling that have been working there a really long time that don't have contracts with the company. Matt Cardona was a great example of that. Alex Shelley was a great example of that. And now you could probably put the Good Brothers into that category as well. But it's likely, very, very likely, that they might sign full-time deals with New Japan Pro Wrestling. Of course, they're factored in and have commitments to New Japan Pro Wrestling until January of next year. They're going to be appearing at the Wrestle Kingdom event. And Carl Anderson holds singles gold in New Japan Pro Wrestling at the moment. He is currently the never openweight champion in New Japan Pro Wrestling. And the tag team are expected to return to New Japan in the near future. As I mentioned, they are part of the Bullet Club. The Wrestling Observer newsletter is reporting that New Japan Pro Wrestling, as opposed to Impact, could become their focus once again. As I mentioned in this report yesterday, they have told Impact that they're happy to work these dates for the remainder of the summer, as long as they don't clash with their New Japan Pro Wrestling dates. That's the situation. They're happy to work the Impact dates when they can, as the storyline or the angle continues to progress. But if they do clash, or there are TV tapings, or there are just events where they clash with New Japan Pro Wrestling, they're going to be doing those New Japan dates because they're the commitments that they have right now. And it would appear that that is shifting to become their full focus in the future. Of course, they were three-time IWGP Tag Team Champions prior to their stints in WWE and Impact Wrestling. And since rejoining the Bullet Club, they've stood alongside the current reigning IWGP World Heavyweight Champion Jay White, with the faction's new lineup standing tall at the end of New Japan Pro Wrestling's Dominion event back in June. They are reportedly on a deal, as I mentioned, with New Japan Pro Wrestling, have commitments through Wrestle Kingdom 17 in January. Alongside their Impact and New Japan Pro Wrestling obligations, the Good Brothers are heavily involved in the Laredo Pro Wrestling Guild, a promotion run in conjunction with the Good Brothers Dojo in Jenkins, Georgia. They have been the LPWG Tag Team Champions for the past 664 days, holding the belt since September of 2020. And it feels more clear, doesn't it? I think that they're going to be shifting their focus to New Japan Pro Wrestling full time. A return to WWE is very much just not on the cards, considering how it ended there. And I suppose in general, if you look at their whole tenure in WWE, Luke Gallows didn't want to go back in the first place. He was against it. You know, he said to AJ, and he said to Kyle Anderson, no, I was there. It's not for me and it's not for us. But he went back with them because they hadn't been in that company before. AJ's still there. Kyle Anderson got the real experience, the tag team experience of WWE, which is they don't care about tag team wrestling. So it didn't work out for him. And then especially with how it ended, Triple H, ironically on a day that he's become the Executive Vice President of Talent Relations once again, convinced them, we want to take care of your future, we want to sign you, we want to keep you, we want to build things around you. Turns down AEW for over that WWE deal in 2019, re-signs, it was late 2018, whenever it was, re-signs with the company, and then just months later they're released as part of the budget cuts with the onset of the pandemic. So they weren't happy with how things ended there. Of course, they clashed with Paul Heyman as well, so that's the situation there. So they're not going back to WWE. I'd be stunned. AEW, of course, is an option, but I think that they probably got a bit of a taste of AEW. Maybe it didn't fit their fancy. You know, they weren't the center of attention. Yes, they're part of the Super Elite. Yes, they had Kenny Omega and all that happening there. But Kenny Omega's due to be coming back soon, and maybe they could be involved in that angle, I guess. But it would appear that the angle that AEW are going to do when it comes to the Elite in the future is Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks, the Elite, going up against the Undisputed Elite, that being Adam Cole, Kyle O'Reilly, and Bobby Fish. I don't see how the Good Brothers particularly fit into that one, unless, of course, they're going to do a thing where the Elite becomes separate to the Undisputed Elite, and then maybe the Good Brothers do come in to sort of fill out that group once again. I don't know. But it would appear that they've got their hands full, certainly, when it comes to New Japan Pro Wrestling. When they signed their contracts with Impact Wrestling back in 2020, there were clauses put in their deal that said that they were going to work the Impact dates around New Japan Pro Wrestling events. But the problem is, or was rather at the time, is that because it was the pandemic, travel to Japan was closed, and it's really just opened up in the last couple of months or so. So I think they've got all of this backlog of New Japan Pro Wrestling stuff that they want to do. They want to be working in front of big Japanese crowds once again, something that they haven't, and a lot of people haven't been able to do for a really long time. So it would appear that we're heading towards the end of the Good Brothers Impact Wrestling tenure. Who knows, anything could happen. As I mentioned, it could all be a work, could all be a swerve, and the Good Brothers eventually do stay with Impact. And I suppose don't be surprised if they do stick a little bit longer around. As I mentioned, maybe they'll work just alongside their New Japan Pro Wrestling dates into January 2023, and maybe once their commitments with New Japan finish in January of next year and they've done some Impact shots in the meantime, maybe that's when they go, okay, let's figure out the next step in our future. Let's figure out where we could go. Let's get some momentum behind us. So that could certainly be a possibility as well. But let me know your thoughts on the Good Brothers' future in Impact Wrestling. What do you think is going to happen? How do you think they're going to get rid off television? Who do you think they're going to drop the Impact Tag Team Championships to? Do you think they're even going to leave in the first place? Is it all just a work? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Be sure to like and subscribe to Wrestle News 365, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.